Plume. Admonition had shown Plume to her room within the impenetrable castle's designated mage tower. The High King had spared no expense in her lodging, decorated with Bavarian commodities. In stark contrast to the dim blue lighting of the castle's halls and the other public areas, bright paper lanterns lit her room well. Redwood furniture filled the spacious room without feeling cramped. A bed large enough for three jutted into a lounging area, which sported a burgundy couch with velvet-lined cushions, a woven rug, and a lockable trunk with the iron key in the latch. To the side of the lounging area was a small office with an empty bookshelf, facing a polished desk, and a chair with armrests covered in the same velvet as the couch. Plume unpackaged her meager belongings into a heavy dresser and an open-hanging closet. On the bookshelf, she unloaded a few architectural and combative spell tomes she had brought from home, along with a few non-magical texts. Once finished, she departed from her room and meandered through the dim corridors of the castle. Despite the dark light, she intended to analyze the castle's structural integrity. 4 massive encircling walls protected the impenetrable castle's core tower, where her meeting with the High King had just occurred. None of the 4 barriers were passable without the assistance of a defensive mage. As a contracted hire, Plume had access to pass through all. She wouldn't be able to stabilize the castle if she couldn't access all parts of it, after all. The innermost layer separated the High King's personal tower and courtyard from the rest of the castle. A second layer protected honored guest housing areas in the castle's other 4 towers, one for the crown's mages, one for the royal chefs, one for the imperial financiers, and one for the Cathedral of the Renowned. The third wall surrounded all military installations and miscellaneous resources provided to the castle staff. The final wall engulfed the majority of Athlea's population, housing residential areas and the general bazaar. The outermost area was the only one open to the sky rather than confined to the flat granite ceilings. Every floor was evenly numbered, every wing was lettered, and every corridor was oddly numbered. Fanciful silver plaques with engraved script designated where each room fit in the schema. During her circuit, Plume felt less out of place than she usually had. Her skin tone was unusually dark for someone from Hyeri, but the impenetrable castle had people ranging from light brown to black. There wasn't one predominant shade, either. Magically, she sensed along the walls. Several arches weren't sufficiently supported within the castle, and, if she had to guess, they would expire within the next rotation or so. If she came to like the High King, she would consider taking the initiative to fix them. But she was not here for general repairs. She was here to stabilize the mines beneath. Trifling trembles and significant tremors echoed in the floor beneath various corridors. Most of the sleeping quarters were stable, along with the dining rooms, the offices, the infirmary, the bathing rooms, several undercrofts, and some of the kitchens and adjoining storerooms. The armory, teaching grounds, baileys, barracks, and the oratory were all in grave condition. She estimated they had a few turns of the moons left, at best. It's outright unethical for the other architectural mages to have already allowed for such dangerous conditions. If I weren't fully equipped to save myself from the floor crumbling beneath my feet, I'd run for fear of my safety. Even if King Panite paid me all the gem in this castle's vault, I couldn't imagine how horrifying it would be to fall through all these layers of granite and die in the mines beneath. Perhaps tellingly, the grounds below the vaults were perfectly intact. Upon examining the dungeons, she was surprised by their accommodations. Each had a neat cot with shelves for a few items for entertainment, and a private area for relieving oneself. She had even seen a book in one cell and a news parchment in another. I can't believe the opulence that spills over every corner of this castle. Little Queen Serpentine would never spend her riches on anything besides upgrading the strength of the prison bars. Abruptly, Plume felt disoriented location-wise. The design of the dungeons hadn't made sense to her. She knew where she had come from, but there was nothing else ahead of her when she had expected there to be. Something about the spacing didn't register properly, and it became more off-putting the more she considered it. Perhaps 2 dueling architects sabotaged each other in the construction of the dungeons. Or maybe the architect who drafted the proposal was incompetent at making perfectly rectangular rooms. Based on the circumstances, the former option's more likely. Plume inspected the castle's open chambers, the great hall, bathing rooms, side halls, rows and rows of market stalls, the minstrel's gallery, privy chambers, and the buttery. Though she had access, she hadn't been bold enough to venture into the royal family solar, private office, or wardrobe in the High King's tower, but otherwise she covered the entire city-sized castle. There are so many chambers. The upkeep must be a nightmare. Not just for the mages, but for the servants too. Even so, I can't believe Coserai's mages allowed the structure's condition to deteriorate this severely. It won't crumble now. I won't allow it. Upon the conclusion of her wandering, she returned to her room to prepare for bed. With a knock at her door, a piece of parchment slid under its opening. Half changed out of her traditional garb and into loose violet sleeping trousers, she opened the door. "Did you need something?" a middle-aged woman with a stack of papers asked. She glanced over Plume's mismatched wardrobe, but did not comment. "Did you slide this paper under my door?" Plume picked up the paper. "Yes, it's your schedule for tomorrow." "Thank you. What's your name?" "Cloth. I'm one of the servants for the mages on staff." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Cloth. I'm Plume." Cloth smiled and nodded politely. "I should finish delivering these." "Of course. I wouldn't want to distract you. It's a pleasure to meet you." "You are a sweetie. It's lovely to meet you as well." After closing the door, Plume opened the folded parchment. The itinerary detailed the time she would meet the other mages, when they would meet the overseer of the mines, when they could lunch, and when they would conclude their work. The itinerary also listed the following day's menu. Seeing honey lamb listed as an option on the parchment elicited saliva to fill the space under her tongue. Plume placed the itinerary on the dresser and picked up a fresh candle from its metal dish by her bedside. Interval markings were carved into the wax, indicating time increments. It had been first moonset by the time she had returned to her bedroom. Using a dull knife from the bedside table drawer, she cut off the spare wax at the first moonset marking, separating earlier time intervals aside. Then, from the metal dish, she grabbed a nail and placed it just above the first sunrise marking, ensuring she'd have enough time to complete her morning routine before she'd be expected to start her day. Then she cast a flame atop the candle wick to start the countdown. With her alarm prepared, she extinguished the rest of the lights and sat on the bed. Soft fibers caressed her palm. Unsure of the material, she swiped her hands across it repeatedly. She wanted all her clothes to have the material in their linings. Perhaps the material was Coserish, and she could find a blouse or two in the local shops. She was confident it would cost her at least a top-tier cut, but it would be worth it. The feather-stuffed pillow was equally comfortable, and she wanted one as a souvenir from her work in the castle. As she drifted into the most comfortable sleep of her life, she couldn't help but feel nervous for her first day working for the High King. The following morning, Plume awoke to the metal clanking of the nail hitting the candle's metal plate. In the dim light of the singular candle, she shot miniature fireballs to ignite her room's mounted oil lamps. Typically, she would feel groggy and out of sorts, but she was excited to get on with the work of the day. She changed into a tight tunic and trousers so that if she needed to climb around rafters in the mines, she could without worrying over loose fabric getting caught on stray hardware. She roped her hair into a large bun and clamped it with a metal dove hairpiece so it would stay out of her face. Poking her head outside her bedroom door, she was pleased that the candle clock had worked as expected. Akol had still yet to rise. Although she hadn't intended to resume her calculations yet, she pulled out her notebook and ran the numbers on the questionable structures from the previous day. Based on her observations, she had given the High King an accurate time estimate. Because Spire hadn't evaluated the entire castle, she assumed she was ahead of the seasoned mage. Her stomach growled, yearning for a morning meal. There would be enough time to sneak over to the kitchen's tower. She couldn't dawdle, though. Once she returned, she'd have to climb up 9 floors to reach the architectural mage's designated office space. She packed her supplies in a cloth bag and strapped it around her shoulder for easy traveling and started for the kitchens. A simple piece of buttered toast and a small volume of grape juice cost her a point cut, an exorbitant amount for such a simple breakfast, but her compensation as a mage on the king's staff would be more than enough to pay for meals. Whether she would save any gem would yet to be seen. For convenience, she levitated her breakfast in front of her on her return trip. Those she passed gasped at the suspended liquid and bread. especially as she ate it while walking. She finished before she reached the office. When she entered, she ogled at the models and the schematics of various parts of the castle that decorated the architectural mage's workspace. Designs of the 5 towers hung on the walls, and glass cases held wooden models of a cutaway of the Cathedral of the Renowned. Natural light filtered in through large, clear windows. The main open area splintered into individual offices and conference rooms, which were decorated similarly. The communal spaces' windows overlooked one of the practice yards. While she loved the feel of the area, she longed to throw fireballs and icicles with the other combat mages in the bailey below. She took note of the mages working in her current spaces. An older man working out calculations in his office, a young man running documents from one office to another, a middle-aged man focusing on casting reinforcement spell, another young man rifling through files, and an ancient man staring longingly out the windows. Spire was not among them. Typical. Slowly, all the mages migrated to one of the conference rooms in preparation for their scheduled introductory meeting. She followed them inside. There didn't seem to be prescribed seats along the table, so she chose one at random toward the middle. She unloaded her pack and set her quill pen, ink, and notebook out in front of her. It was only when the middle-aged man tried to sit in the seat where she had sat did anyone take note of her presence. He had been absorbed in his documents and hadn't seen her. Pulling his nose out of his notebook, he said, "Oh, sorry about that," and moved to the seat available to her right. The 2 oldest men claimed the opposite ends of the table. A few others entered the conference room. One of them was Cloth. However, Master Spire had still yet to appear. Soon thereafter, the conference began.
"Do you have any indication of when Master Spire and Master Plume might arrive?"
The ancient man on one end asked to the stranger sitting next to Cloth. Plume perked up at the mention of her name. Before Plume could respond, the confused man said, "I do not." "I left the itineraries for both new mages in their rooms last night." Cloth directed her eyes toward Plume, indicating they were asking the wrong person. "I received the itinerary," Plume said.
"And where are your masters?"
the ancient man asked her. Plume cringed. "As I was saying, I received the itinerary, and I am here on time because I am Master Plume. I cannot speak to the location of my tardy colleague because I am not his apprentice." Some of the men displayed shocked micro-expressions before recomposing their faces. Cloth's mouth curved in response to the verbal jab. "It is a pleasure to meet you all," Plume said. "Perhaps we should discuss how Master Spire and I will reinforce the mines below the armory and the barracks. The ground was most unstable in those areas. Given the extra weight they bear, I'm surprised they haven't collapsed." "That's not the purpose of this meeting. Besides, shouldn't that be discussed between you and Master Spire?" a snobby young man asked. Plume attempted to defend her position. The ancient man on the left end sniffed.
"Well, it's unfortunate Master Spire is not here yet, but we will continue as planned."
"This isn't just a conversation between Master Spire and me. That's why I broached the subject. If you can't maintain the castle as is, then why should we bother to support a proper foundation?"
"How dare you claim we are failing in our duties? The impenetrable castle stands strong,"
the other older man claimed. Plume smirked. "No, it doesn't." She opened her journal and turned to one of the worst arches in the castle. "This is considered structurally sound to you all?" The middle-aged man, who had almost sat on her, took her journal and reviewed her calculations. His eyes widened. Before he passed the notebook back, he turned to her. "Asiel, bless us, you're right. Where is that?" Interrupting the meeting, Master Spire entered, carrying a substantial breakfast with him.
"Good morning, Spire,"
the ancient mage greeted him like an old friend. The room's attention shifted entirely to the tardy master. Through their greetings to Spire, Plume caught the names Gable, Crockett, Tympanum, Niche, and Lintel. Though there was a gross of servants assigned to support the royal offices, Cloth, Parchment, and Sponge assisted the architectural mages for the day.
"How have you been?"
Master Crockett, the high architectural mage, asked Spire.
"I'm still acclimating to the new environment and timetables. First sunrise is earlier here than it is in Monrighty. I hope you adjust soon."
The older men continued exchanging pleasantries on the far side of the table. Plume raised an eyebrow. First sunrise is also earlier here than in Hyeri, but I still made it on time. While the others were speaking together, Master Timpanum, the man who had glanced at Plume's notebook, returned to the topic with her. Sorry for the interruption. He cast a glance toward the gathered group of men. I wouldn't take their attitudes personally. I've only been employed in the castle for a few rotations, and they don't respect me yet either. But I agree that these areas are troublesome. The numbers don't lie. Plume appreciated that at least one of the mages acknowledged her. Master Timpanum flipped through the pages eagerly. I knew this one spot over in 4E161 needed attention, but I hadn't realized the armory was so critical. So, how can I help you fine gentlemen? Spire asked to the whole table, getting past the pleasantries. Given your background, we feel your talents would be best served by aiding us elsewhere. We wouldn't want to force you to trek down into the mines. We can spare the younger blood to do that, Crockett said, gesturing to Plume. Excuse me? Plume asked. Excuse you, Master Gable, the wrinkled mage at the opposite end of the table, said. As you have only just arrived, you have a limited understanding of our needs. Master Spire and I were hired for a specific job. Are you willing to disobey the High King by taking him away from that job for your own purposes? We are the architectural experts of this castle. We know its requirements. The High King entrusts us with the division of resources and labor, Crockett said, looking as outraged as Plume felt. If you do not address these structural concerns immediately, then people, mostly Imperial soldiers, will die. If Master Spire does not aid with the reinforcements of the mines, then he will be culpable when this whole city collapses. But if your pride stands in the way of your job, then you deserve what comes for you. The men were taken aback. Timpanum shifted beside her. Crockett stood. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you not care when lives are at stake? What will it take for you to see past your denial? The ground quaking beneath your feet? When you are trapped alive in a granite coffin, do not expect anyone to help you. Plume stormed out of the conference room and out of the office space. How am I supposed to work with this? She looked at the itinerary. By first sunhigh, she would have to find the entrance to the mines and meet up with the lead miner, who would navigate her through their labyrinth. I don't have to be there until another turn of the suns, and I can probably find the entrance to the mines on my own. The adit is likely in the outermost section of the castle, but the help would save time. I might as well do this job as effectively and efficiently as possible, from roots to leaves. Before she had traipsed too far, Timpanum followed after her. Master Plume, wait a moment. In the hall's low light, his billowing marigold cloak took on an emerald tinge to it. She paused while he approached. Can you show me to the mines? Yes, of course. He automatically headed toward the tower's winding staircase. Thank you. You're welcome. Why are you helping me? She asked. Timpanum ran his hand through his graying hair and scratched his scalp. I appreciate your dedication to the work, even if your delivery is brash. Plume clasped her hands together to prevent her agitation from spilling into her words. In Hyeri, if it's the youngest person in the room with the best idea, that's what we do. Our people don't get caught up in pride, especially if it would come at the cost of time, resources, or especially human lives. As they continued down the stairs, Timpanum shrugged. It sounds like a good way to function. Low Queen Serpentine doesn't stand for fruitless workers. I wish the High King would implement a similar policy. It improves inefficiencies. However, even as she spoke the words, Plume considered the severe drawbacks to her queen's policies. She was aware of her kingdom's monarch's fierce punishments, but she did not elaborate on the subject. So, Master Timpanum, where are you from? Call me Tim. I worked half a lifetime in Gia before being hired here. Then just Plume for me as well. What was it like there? Plume had gotten slightly ahead of Tim on the stairs and had to turn back to address him. As long as we completed projects on time, King Diaspor let us manage ourselves, Tim said. The food was better there than it is here, but if you don't live inside the Frosted Castle, you would pay for it. Wouldn't you normally pay for food? The cost wasn't gem, but comfort.
Our king tasked Gia's sole weather mage with protecting the crops and providing a moderate environment within the walls of the castle. Because the wall's exteriors aren't protected, they developed the infamous layer of frost on them. And King Diaspor's a greedy, short-sighted prick, she said. It's complicated. I understand that it's important to protect the plants for the economy, but it does get chilly at night without a decent fire burning. Plume shrugged. She knew little of economic strategy. But to have the entire population struggle for the sake of profit and indulgence is criminal. Have you noticed King Panite having a similar disposition? Is he willing to sacrifice the quality of life of his subjects for financial gain? It was a loaded question. Plume had formed an opinion of Panite's rule for herself. She wanted to establish whether Tim was the sort who enjoyed complaining for the sake of it, or if he provided accurate assessments. Oh, no, Panite spares no expense to ensure our absolute well-being. You inspire even being here means he prioritizes the safety of his citizens above the exorbitant gem it's costing him, Tim said. I received that impression too. My lodgings alone are more than I could ask for. The amenities are likewise impressive, and I doubt the High King has them installed for his own use. He seems too busy to take frequent trips to the theater or the gaming parlor. He works harder than anyone I've ever met. I don't know if I've seen him venture outside his tower in weeks. Sometimes he's cooped up in his office for multiple turns of the moons on end. Changing the topic, Plume wanted to pick his brain about the Archspawn. Have you had the opportunity to meet Ether? I spoke with him individually after our sermon once. He regularly hosts private prayer sessions to give spiritual guidance and to assuage people's concerns. I see him outside of the services all the time, too. He has a fairly regular schedule. What's he like as a person? Pious? I didn't get a good feel for his personality. His speech felt rehearsed when we met. He sees so many people every day, he probably has a script. Ether might serve as a puppet for the High Priest, or as Queen Serpentine believes, the High King. Plume was habitually skeptical, but she also considered her own biases might corrupt her perception. Tim and Plume arrived at the second wall and requested permission to pass out of it. The defensive mage standing guard at the gate approved their request and turned a piece of the massive wall intangible, while the two exited from the intersection of the castle. Immediately after they crossed, the wall returned to its solid state. Tim steered them through the third castle section and into the largest, open fourth section. The mines are over this way, he said, directing with an upturned palm. The pair trudged a fair distance around massive stables and farming fields until they reached the mouth of the mines. This was better concealed than anticipated. I would have struggled to discover the entrance alone. Thank you for showing me. It's still well before second sunrise, so I doubt the lead miner will meet with me yet. Any time. He leaned against one of the wooden beams of the audit. This is the next item on your itinerary, isn't it? I guess I should have asked before marching you out here. Plume liked his disposition. Tim was far more relaxed than she was, but he seemed like he carried his own weight. Still, she wasn't sure why he was hanging around. It is the next scheduled item, but if you have to get back to the office, I can handle everything from here. Tim squinted toward the horizon, looking for a sign of the second sun, Hinnook. He looked away after a moment. You heard Crockett. He said that this was a job for us thin bloods. Thin bloods? You know, those rambunctious rascals that are finicky and too easily given to change. Usually to describe younger folk. As opposed to thick bloods that are stuck in their ways and resist adaptation. Metaphorically, their blood settles and struggles to flow with new adjustments. Plume supposed the expressions made sense, and she assumed Tim lumping himself in with her lot had been meant as a joke. They are disrespectful terms, Tim clarified. I wouldn't go around calling people that without good reason. Got it. Aren't you going to alienate yourself from them by helping me? They were displeased with me already. Tim rubbed the back of his neck. I alerted the High King about the problem with the mines. I can imagine their discontent. Plume smiled at the thought of announcing Crockett's and Gable's failures to the entire staff of castle mages and advisors. You look surprised by the numbers, though. He pulled out a notebook of his own. The arc right outside the armory, 4E161, right? That was the page you had turned to when you passed it to me? Yes, she confirmed, scrolling through the pages to double-check. When I analyzed the integrity of that same arch a couple weeks ago, these were the numbers. Plume looked over his free body diagram to ensure he accounted for all the forces in play. She reviewed his equations and his calculations. It's deteriorated this much in mere weeks? Apparently so. Plume wondered what would do that much damage so quickly. Have there been any quakes? Tim shook his head. She considered other factors. What are the atmospheric conditions like in the castle? I doubt the problem would stem from any of those. The weather mages maintain low humidity and standard temperature and pressure in most parts. In the alchemic labs, the moisture is sucked out of the air to avoid contaminating elements. Otherwise, only the farms and orchards receive rainfall. Only the smithy has abnormal pressures for forging weapons, and only the pantries maintain cold conditions for food preservation. That all is normal. I won't completely dismiss it, but I'll keep it as a low probability suspect. The armory is one of the oldest parts. She had guessed as much. Does anything burrow in granite? Like how desert terrascae burrow in sandstone? I don't know of anything. And I also can't say that I've ever seen entrance or exit holes, suggesting an infestation. Plume hated to consider her next idea. Have there been any rumors of demonists in or around the castle recently? Not to my knowledge. You suppose the foundation's been cursed? Perhaps. Granite doesn't deteriorate like this, especially in an armory of all the structures in the castle. Alternatively, an alchemist might have devised a substance that acts as an acid to stone. I haven't observed evidence of that either, though. We can ruminate on it. Plume wanted to consider all possible options, but unfortunately, a curse was the strongest logical conclusion. While waiting for the lead miner to arrive, Plume and Tim discussed topics ranging from best-priced market vendors to the weather expectations. At one point, she asked what he was planning on doing after his shift, and he responded he would spend time with his wife, Lime. In the meanwhile, slaves regularly entered and exited the mines, carrying crates of goods or pushing carts filled with ore. At one point, Plume juggled miniature fireballs to entertain herself. Did you pick that trick up at the college? Tim asked. Made it up myself, actually, Plume said. Did you pick up any when you were there? I focused on my studies, but I learned a couple of tricks with transportation magic. Nothing flashy, more on the practical side. Are you criticizing my pastime? Plume tried her hardest not to take offense. I am just concerned that we're going to need every ounce of magic that we have, Tim said diplomatically. Plume shook her head and smiled. What? Tim asked. I'm assuming you aren't familiar with the words of Emeran of Ferdin of the 7th Age. An architectural mage, I presume? You don't read spell tomes, Plume stated. Can't say I do. Spell tomes are for wizards, not sorcerers, he said skeptically. I'll tell you what. I bet I can do double as much work today than you can, and I bet I can still juggle my little fireballs at the end of it all. Tim hesitated. Okay, what are we wagering? Breakfast tomorrow? I'll take the wager. By the way you're burning through magic, you better get your gem sack ready, he said. Plume didn't say anything. She didn't want to jeopardize her chances for free food. She merely continued playing with her fire. She made larger balls, split and joined them, and raised their temperatures to burn from yellow-orange to blue. Tim watched on. Plume assumed he also didn't want to risk losing out on a free meal either by distracting her with a conversation. So she showed off her skills. As scheduled, the lead miner greeted them. Are you my architectural mages, then? She greeted. That's us. Thank Basil you've come in time, the lead miner stated. And Pyrite. She grasped Tim's forearm as he introduced himself. Plume had been unfamiliar with the gesture, but after watching Tim, she engaged the forearm greeting the same way he had. A nice firm grasp, Pyrite complimented when Plume introduced herself. Let me show you two around and get a feel for the layout of the mines. The trio entered the audit, but Pyrite continued. There's nearly as much infrastructure under Coserai as there is above ground. It's all interconnected, too. Down here, we've got spots for mining granite and iron, as you might have guessed by the castle's makeup. And we've got some for gemstones. We've got diamond, panite, tanzanite, benitoite, and grandarite to list the most popular ones. Steel beams reinforced the tunnel as far as Plume could see. The steel could be part of our problem. Pyrite gave a couple parchment maps to Plume and Tim. They detailed the most intricate maze Plume had ever seen.
Every note providing information was scrawled in the tiniest lettering to avoid obstructing the rest of the tunnel markings. I'll go blind trying to work out these details. What materials do we have to work with? Plume asked. Tim caught himself in a snort, but Pirate responded, You're working for the High King. You have every resource at your disposal. Titanium is our best option. Tim, do you agree? Yes. Until our alchemists devise a stronger material, titanium is our best choice. Plume asked, Could we have titanium beams brought to the mouth of the mines? Tim frowned slightly. Perhaps closer to the sites. I don't need them brought down. Plume avoided grinning. But if you do, then we can ask the slaves to make that concession for you. Pirate shook her head. Our slaves are strong. We can have them bring the beams down without a problem. For my portion, they can leave the supplies at the adit. I insist, Plume said. Okay. If you need other materials, please ask. I'll give a general tour now, if convenient. Pirate shifted toward the mine's innards. Please, Tim agreed, eyeing Plume suspiciously for her request. The three workers descended into the labyrinth of mines. Pirate described where they were in regard to the ground level above as they wound their way through the main trunks of the tunnels, rich with minerals. She further explained that upon Boya the Innocent's final judgment, he had blessed the land with such valuable stones. The High King owned the vast majority of the mines, and he had sections for every kingdom's currency, gemstone and coin alike. As far as Plume could tell, there was no indication of the root cause for the structural erosion on the surface level of the castle. However, she noted which tunnels were in the most desperate need of reinforcement. Tim agreed with her on which those were. Some of the tunnels were merchant-owned. While Plume led the project, she still recognized the delicacy of new construction in someone else's property, and she would discuss her intentions with the owners as was appropriate. There would be plenty to work on while she awaited their approval. I'm going to start with the sections directly below the armory, Plume told him. I'll take the area under the training grounds and barracks. Will we measure our success through distance or by the number of beams we used? Let's do the number of beams. Distance might be too difficult to measure properly. We shouldn't need to add anything to the existing structures. Just swap the failing steel beams with titanium ones. That effort should greatly reduce the amount of magic required to support the castle's weight, Plume assessed, feeling the beams to her side. Before coming down here myself, I thought the opposite. Now that I've seen the structures here, I think you're right. The new structural issues in the castle aren't originating in these mines. Even so, we would still help the initial problem by replacing the steel. They got to work, but Plume had a sinking feeling that it would only be the beginning of the effort to save the castle. After the slaves delivered the beams to the mouth of the cave for her stockpile, Plume whispered, Grita diath ruieth mogundomo. The titanium beams lifted from the ground outside and navigated themselves through the tunnels to her position. They stacked into a neat pile where she worked each beam into place individually. She ensured that the floating beams levitated far above the workers' heads to neither injure them nor impede their work. Methodically, she removed the steel beams from the spell, levied their load onto her own sorcery, and then switched the titanium beam in, sealed it in place, and shifted the weight from her strength to the stamina of the new beam. She continued in this fashion for dozens of replacement beams, which turned into hundreds. She worked as fast as her assigned slaves could retrieve beams for her. Because they didn't have to lug the metal shafts into the mines, they worked quickly, just not as quickly as she did. She made a note to discover where the spare beams lived, so in the future she could move all of them herself. Pirate revisited her to ask if she needed anything, and Plume asked about the stockpile location then. Pirate promised to show her the following day. That's probably for the best. I don't want to risk losing the bet by taking a detour. Not that I will. At one point, Tim examined her work. He was panting by the time he found her, 2,000 paces from where she had started. How is this possible? His eyes widened as he watched one beam slide through the passageway toward her, and another two suspended while the swapping occurred. Amaran of Verdun of the 7th Age. A spell tome? He asked. She nodded. He was the greatest architectural mage of all time, from the Mazaouin Guild. I leveraged his magic to aid my own. I've never considered the idea. You know the holy language, then?
I learned it before I learned the common tongue. My master was oddly ungifted with magic for a sorceress, so Tome subsidized her abilities. But she recognized how useful the books were, and she passed her knowledge to me. I can teach you if you'd like. I know the language as well. My parents were priests and taught it to me so I could read holy texts in their original wordings. It'd be relatively easy for you to improve your magical capacity if you read some of Imran's works. But as for our bet, what should I get for the morning meal tomorrow? Plume grinned as she juggled her little fireballs once more. Tim's expression soured before he returned to work. The following morning, Tim honored his wager after being severely outpaced by his newest colleague. "Thank you," Plume said as Tim removed a point cut and a few shards to cover her morning meal. Heading up to the architectural mage's office for the morning meeting, Tim sulked over his hot tea. "I would have honored the agreement if it had gone in your favor," she said lightly. "But you knew it wouldn't because you cheated," he grumbled. "Cheated? The wager skewed in your favor. If you leveraged spell tomes, I would have lost. You can read the tomes too. I'm sure there are copies in the castle's library." "It would be a lot harder for me than it was for you," he said. "I don't have copious free time to learn them like you did when you were an apprentice." "You can be both a sorcerer and wizard if you so choose. Yes, it would still be hard. However, only a few hundred in this world can. Less than a handful do. I'm astonished that there aren't any other mages here, of all places, who use both. But you now know of the opportunity to enhance your skills and gain an advantage on other mages, rather than sulk over losing a silly bet. You took a chance on supporting me. You can view it as a terrible mistake, and we can both be miserable for the next few weeks, or you can see it as a learning opportunity, as I do." "What would you learn from me? You're clearly an expert." "I am an excellent mage, but there's always more to learn. Wisdom comes in all forms for all facets of life." "So why do you disrespect the older mages? They are full of wisdom." "As far as I've seen, you have much greater wisdom than they have. They may have worked this area longer than I've been alive, but they resist betterment. You at least seem open to it. They prioritize tradition rather than innovation, and that is unacceptable. There's always a better way to do something. The trick is to seek it out again after you've found the latest improvement." "Keep talking like that, and Panite might not let you return home," Tim joked. "What do you mean?" "Given that architectural mages are rare, the High King, along with the other royals, are in a bind. If Panite could fire all his deadweight mages and replace them with you, I bet he would. But you don't want to find yourself carrying the entire weight of the castle on your shoulders. I'd be careful of the high performer penalty." "I intend to stay on the High King's staff, but as a combative mage, not an architectural one." "Good luck with that," he said. "There's enough of them to go around." "I'll have to prove how invaluable I am, then." Tim drew his mouth to the side. "Definitely try to while you have the chance." This was the insight Plume had hoped to gain from him. She needed to know what challenges she might face in the pursuit of her ambitions. The pair of mages entered the offices and proceeded to the conference room table. All the other mages ignored them. Tim attempted to introduce Plume to one of his acquaintances, Master Niche, but he avoided conversation. Plume dismissed the encounter and devoured her expensive meal. Only after she disposed of the mess did she take out her journal. She would hate if she spilled anything on its pages. She added notes based on the work from the previous day. She detailed the various locations that received new beams. When the day's work was over, she had inspected Tim's efforts. He had interchanged 100 cubits worth of beams. He had also severely disrupted the mining process in his sections, but that was beside the point. Once the meeting started, she put her notebook away. Crockett said, "We had a productive day with Spire yesterday. He's more than proved himself. We have again reinforced the High King's main tower, and Spire is working on a decorative granite monument for the Cathedral of the Renowned." "You're wasting your time with artworks when this castle is crumbling," Plume exploded. Crockett paused. "You were going to take on that project." "I was hired to stabilize the mines. The imminent problem's not in the mines. It's in the castle itself." "If you know what it is, why don't you fix it?" "It's your job to fix it," Plume stated. "And if you don't, it will become everyone's problem." "Because the castle will crumble," Gable taunted. Yes, Plume affirmed. Doubtful. In just a day, the blight on this castle has spread. I visited the same spots that were the most highly at risk, and the factor of safety has dropped in each area by a third. If the rate of deterioration continues, then the armory, barracks, and practice grounds of the castle have mere days left to stand. This is preposterous. Stop making noise for the sake of it. We've strengthened that granite a small slice of the rotations ago. The area in question isn't falling unless the mine below it is. It is falling, and even after refurbishing the mines below the armory, it hasn't helped, Plume said. The foundation of this castle is cursed. If we don't act soon, the curse will spread. Stop your prattling. You sit among the greatest minds of our age. They know what they're doing. Clearly, you do not. It would be best if you return to the mines to complete your task, Spire said. Plume had been surprised Spire had spoken up. Yet, how quickly he aligned himself with the ancient mages perhaps should not have astounded her. How ironic. Plume left the office. Tim followed. She turned toward a central corridor. This isn't the way to the mines. I know, I'm not going to the mines. Where are you going? Tim asked. Somewhere that might actually make a difference. Where would that be? Well, we're dealing with a curse, are we not? I'm going to get a blessing. Plume crossed the passageway to the cathedral's tower. Perhaps our resident Archspawn can help us summon an angel. Plume, please wait. You can't just ask Ether for something. He's old enough to make his own decisions, isn't he? There's a process for requesting his aid, he said desperately. Our case has to be reviewed. There isn't time! We have to do something now! We can't wait for a review. We're going to get in trouble. His arched eyebrows pleaded for her to reconsider. We're going to get in worse trouble if the Imperial soldiers are slaughtered by the infrastructure meant to protect them. She advanced the granite stairs to the castle's internal cathedral. Even though the Cathedral of the Renowned was entirely inside the impenetrable castle, it still had all the features of its entrance as though it stood as a separate building. In black stone with silver metal accents, a rose window sat atop an archivolt that extended outwards from the entrance doors. Every architectural feature of the style was included for the novelty. How gaudy. She yanked one of the excessively ornate cathedral doors open. Inside, the ceilings vaulted upward, seemingly forever, in a trick of architectural illusion and a touch of mist. Sleek granite walls framed dull cobalt glass windows cut in geometric patterns. The dim light gave an intentional and dreadful appearance to the cathedral, mirroring the rest of the castle's common areas. Each feature and staircase materialized as a shadowed silhouette in front of the tall, thin windows, blue light caught in the silver features' edges. A massive altar dedicated to the archdemon Otia lined the back wall. Otia had been born in Coserai in the Ninth Age, and upon the first High King's, King Vastafel's construction of the imperial castle at the end of the 12th Age, they dedicated the altar to her. Otia's altar had black candles burning atop it. Alchemic metal shavings gave the candlelight a cold blue hue rather than the usual warm orange flicker. The candles sparked the intimidating feeling one ought to when standing before the archdemon's house of worship. Silver sculpted busts of hideous tortured demons protruded from the altar's upper ledges. Still gaudy. Structurally unsupported crisscrossing stairs patterned along the side walls, leading to private prayer areas. If Plume were to have designed the cathedral, she would have added supports and decreased the sorcery required to maintain them. Where would he be? She asked him. At the top, there's a massive open prayer space that sits over the entrance. Only the High Priest, the High King, and Ether are allowed there, though, which is why we should go through the proper channels. I'm good friends with a spawn from Yael, but I'd never be so presumptuous as to interrupt her workday without scheduling a meeting first. Tim, if you're not confident in this, then you don't have to come. She had to be firm in her resolve to have a chance to obtain Ether's help. If Queen Serpentine hadn't exaggerated, Ether was a selfish, entitled Archspawn who hadn't cared for anyone other than himself. To convince someone like that, she needed to prove he would benefit from helping her. Uncertainty wouldn't convince him of anything. I'd prefer not to risk the eternal fate of our age. I'll wait for you here, by the entrance. She nodded, then climbed the absurd number of stairs, passing a priest or a citizen every few flights. Her breathing deepened the higher she rose. My calves are going to be in great shape by the end of this assignment. She passed dozens of halls and rooms that sprouted from each landing. Does anyone use these spaces, or are they an impressive waste of material? Once the prominent cavern opened ahead of her, she straightened and caught her breath. Ether meditated toward the edge of a slanted floor, which was open to the long descent to the castle's ground level. If the high priest's conviction desired, he could push Ether over the edge to his death with a gentle palm against his back. Perhaps the downward slanted floor serves a second purpose, to instill fear in whoever looks down on the masses below. It could keep Ether humble. The peaceful dragonfly wings emerging from his back would do nothing to break his fall. Initially, Plume had wondered if Ether's wings would be more spectacular than any other spawns, but they appeared to be a similar size and translucence as all the others. There was a solid gate at the top of the stairs that wrapped around the part of the open platform. Anyone who attempted to jump around it would fall to their death. A guard waited outside the gate and stared her down. "That's far enough," the guard told her. "Oh, I don't want to pass through the gate," she said. She climbed over the stairs guardrail and stepped into the open air. The guard grabbed at her, but she was already out of his reach, safely balanced on an invisible architectural barrier. Ether hadn't moved from his meditative position, but peeked at her stunt through one squinting eye. Close to the edge, she mirrored his meditating stance. As he controlled his breaths, his wings beat in time with his slow inhales and exhales. The high priest whispered in furious tones to the guard to contain her, but neither knew how to reach her out in the open of the deadly drop. Up close, Plume could tell Ether would be of medium build and a few rotations when he fully matured. She could also tell he'd be attractive. For now, he looked young. "Hello," Ether said, bemused. "Hello, I'm Master Plume, a new architectural mage here," she said, looking him square in his ebony eyes, regardless of what it meant for her eternal soul. "I can tell," he said with a deadpan. "You must not know that it is forbidden." "I haven't entered onto your platform," she said innocently. "I sit on a floor of my own creation." Ether cracked a reluctant smile. Light danced along the veins of his phantom wings. "I suppose you're right. What do you want? A prayer? Reassurance?" "As I said, I'm an architectural mage. The High King hired me to rectify the structural damage of the mines." Ether glanced at the ground below himself and then returned her gaze. His wings dissolved to mist once he understood her words. "The cathedral is not in danger currently," she reassured. "The mines also aren't the main issue. However, the stone near the armory has been cursed." "Ah, that's where I come in." "Could you request a blessing to counter the curse? Otherwise, it'll spread through the granite and collapse the whole castle in a matter of weeks," she said, "including the cathedral." "That is serious." Slowly, Ether's wings formed into shards of glass. "It's a miracle parts of the castle haven't collapsed already," she said. "I can't stop a curse with sorcery or witchcraft. It needs a blessing. Perhaps said miracle has rewarded us thus far in return for our good faith. As I do not wish my home destroyed along with thousands of innocents, I will help you. I will draw upon the magic of my ancestors and request a blessing. In the meantime, I will contact all known warlocks of the light to transport here if the archangels do not respond to my request." "As the Archspawn, I'm certain that you will succeed, but thank you, I appreciate it," Plume said. The high priest had held his tongue during the conversation, but as it neared to an end, he looked as though he might interject. Ether stood, as did she. He extended his forearm out, and she grasped it the same way as she had with Pyrite. The high priest gasped. Ether had taken the tiniest step when he turned toward her, so one of his feet rested precariously close to the edge of his stone platform. "You're bold. I'll remember you, Plume." I could easily pull Ether to his death if I wished. "I hope you do," she said, letting go of his arm. In the night, whispers of the curse had crept toward the reinforcements. All of Tim's and Plume's work would be ruined if the blessing didn't come soon. While working the next day, Parchment came to retrieve Plume from the mines to meet with Panite's lead advisor, Admonition. She had expected something like this, and she followed Parchment dutifully.
Through the highest tower, she climbed to meet the High Vizier. Her legs had had enough stairs, and they strained to make it up. Outside the office, Parchment instructed her to wait until Admonition finished with his current meeting. The wait wasn't long, but she examined the tapestry hanging outside the office, which faced the only bench. It depicted the gory aftermath of the birth of Otia as an archdemon. Monstrous creatures decimated the paradise of Balia Island, and the demon erupted out of a smoke cloud, directing her burning gaze toward whoever sat on the bench outside the office. Interesting that Admonition attempts to intimidate those he meets with before he speaks with them. It probably helps to keep the rule breakers in line if they're given a healthy dose of fear or guilt before speaking with him. When it was her turn, Plume entered the office, unfazed by the grotesque tapestry. The administrator's office lacked similar disturbing imagery and was generally unremarkable, with a singular, quarter-filled bookshelf, a line of parchment chests, and 2 chairs set on opposite sides of the desk. "What can I help you with?" she asked Admonition. Sitting with his fat rolls neatly folded against the armrests of his oversized office chair, he looked like an overgrown pomelo fruit. His head looked tiny compared to the rest of his body, and one of his chins was longer than his forehead. Briefly, Plume wondered if his legs could even balance his weight long enough to walk, let alone stand. "Take a seat," he said. "I've heard you've been disruptive." "If you substitute disruptive with productive, then you're right." She reclined in the plain, low chair across from him, with her arms folded together. Her knees came up awkwardly to her chest, so she crossed her legs, grateful that the uncomfortable wooden block of a chair didn't have armrests. "The other mages are a bunch of thick-bloods that will have the deaths of the entire population of Aplia on their hands," she finished for him. "The high priest," Admonition tried again, "is irrelevant. I don't know how many people I have to tell, but the castle's foundation has been cursed, and we need to fix it." "Me," he pointed to himself. "You need to tell me, not Ether." "I told the other architectural mages, and they disregarded my findings," she said. "They told me that you were too inexperienced to understand the difference between a curse and fixable corrosion." Her temper flared, and she stood from the chair. "They are so arrogant that they haven't examined the castle themselves. They should be forced out of their positions before they hurt someone. They assume their work is sufficient to stabilize the walls and support the weight. It's not. It's laughable." "They are all well-regarded mages with reputable names. You are unknown. I am not an architectural mage, so I have no means of knowing who is right. I have to make the decision on who to trust." "Tell me," she said, looking to the bookshelf behind his back. "Which of those books have you not read?" She got the feeling he was the type of man who read a book halfway, forgot about it, and later claimed he finished it. He turned around and studied the books. "I haven't read the ones that I don't need." "And why is that?" "Because there is more pressing information in the others," he said, tiring of her wordplay. "You can decide perfectly fine then," she said. "How did you conclude that?" he asked. "You didn't know what any of those books contained before you read them. Sure, they had their titles, but you didn't know until you finished the book what it discusses and what it omits. You deduced which ones to read by their vague titles and reputations. You don't even know what you risk by not reading the other books, and yet you don't read them. But you have decided the consequences are suitable to wager. You know the risk I have presented before you. Can you confidently make the wager that you know what's in each of our books based on our titles? Can you be sure that the pages haven't started falling out of their bindings? Can you risk the lives within the city because you don't know of my abilities?" He sat for a long time digesting her words. "Even if I'm wrong, what does it cost you?" Plume asked. "The order of this castle, for one." "Maybe you should publicize the rules better." "You were warned," Admonition said. Plume wondered if Tim tattled on her. "By whom?" "The high priest," Admonition said. "He didn't say anything, just sat back and whispered to the guard." "Another instance I have to take on faith." "I didn't know I was supposed to report to you," she said honestly. He looked at her. "Most are not so impetuous that they engage Ether at their whim." "It's necessary. He can help, so I asked him. No one within these walls can wait to act, including the Archspawn, if he wishes his home to survive." "He is your social superior," Admonition said. "As is High King Panite. You would do well to respect them both properly." "I do respect them both.
Ask Ether if he had an issue with me asking for help. Ask the High King if he takes issue with me trying to do my job and save his people. I sidestep social norms because I respect them enough not to cower behind the alleged authority of crusty mages. Because taking the steps to save this castle is within my ability. After all, I believe they are the best courses of action, and I will not have my actions questioned by someone who is not my social superior. You disrespect the process of our High King system. I think it's your system, she said. He was taken aback. That the High King entrusted to me. Still your system. What if we ask the High King his opinion? Preposterous, Admonition said. He's occupied. If you wish to meet with him, then you have to schedule an appointment weeks in advance. Interesting, as I was ushered into his office as soon as I arrived, at an unscheduled time. It was a coincidence a time slot had opened, he said flatly. Regardless, we can't afford not to find a blessing. She unfolded herself, stood, and left the office. I haven't dismissed you, he called. I have work to do. After an exhausting day, arguing with the mages and against the vizier, Plume wanted nothing more than to eat in her bedroom and fall asleep. A light knock came from her door. She wondered if it was Tim coming to discuss her meeting with Admonition. If it had been Admonition, the blow probably would have been much more forceful. She hadn't expected Ether. He smiled cordially. His wings were pulsing ribbons with fraying ends. He had changed from his meditation robes into the garb of a prince, with a green chrysanthemum in his chest pocket to match the green and beige colors of his caftan and layered fabrics. By the extravagance of his clothing, Plume could have mistaken him for Panon's offspring. Good evening, my lady, he greeted. I am no lady. Perhaps not. Do you have a preference in title? I am a master, but Plume is fine, she said. Would you like to come in and take a seat? He shook his head. A strand of his straight black hair fell, and he swept it back into place. I wouldn't dream of being so forward to make such a request. I wanted to confirm that I've started praying to the archangels. That, and to give you this. Ether withdrew the flower from his pocket, drew closer to her, and handed it over, cupping it in her hands ever so gently. It is customary for the archangels to give their colored flowers to those they assist, so in good faith, I give this to you now. He had been so close, she wasn't sure where to go. Overwhelmingly, he smelled of blackberries. She carefully removed her hands from his, trying her best to avoid offending him, and smelled the flower's fresh scent instead. Thank you. If you will not come in, would you like to take a walk with me around the castle? She threaded the flower stem through her thick hair near her ear. While she had no intention of becoming intimate with the flirtatious archspawn, she recognized that she needed allies, especially influential ones. She was aware anything she said to Ether might make it to anyone else in the castle, so she would be prudent with her words. I would enjoy that, he said. Which direction? While his expression and words flowed coolly, crackling electricity in his wings betrayed his rising excitement. Toward the library? She suggested. Perfect. Where are you from, Plume? Hyeri. What's it like there? Ominous, she huffed. How do you mean? Like how the impenetrable castle is? His ribbon wings shriveled to nubs as he focused on the conversation. A bit. I suppose each monarch has important choices to make, in which mages they invest in to protect their kingdoms and provide for their people. Queen Serpentine invests in her weather mages. Around each city, they brew unbearable conditions as a layer of protection. The only way in or out is by transportation mage, with an exception for trading caravans. Thick fogs line the streets, blocking out daylight and long sight lines. It makes for an unsettling life. This castle won't provide relief from disquieting conditions, he warned. Besides the low light in the corridors, you mean? She asked. You'll learn for yourself. I may have already. I've incensed each person I've met thus far. You haven't angered me yet, but others may not find your strong personality as palatable as I do. She didn't internalize the empty flattery. How do you like it here, aside from unsettling? It's fine, as long as you play everyone's game. For me, it's easy. I pray, I meditate, I give private blessings, I study the holy language, I lead services on holidays, I entertain noble visitors, and I judge prisoners. It's straightforward. In the holy language, she asked what he did to entertain himself. Mirroring her choice in tongues, he responded that he toured the castle late at night with pleasant women. She laughed at his answer, seeing through the act, but indulging his attempt nonetheless. I don't have the option to dismiss him. If he doesn't conjure a blessing within the next day or two, we'll all need to start evacuating. Realistically, I'm kept busy. On occasion, I'll get invited to a cabinet meeting, but that happens less often than I'd like. Cabinet meetings sound important. Can I ask another favor of you? Quite presumptuous. I doubt the mages will let me know if there's a meeting I should attend that hasn't made it onto my daily schedule. Can you let me know if there is one? That is a much simpler task than your previous request, and yes, I certainly will. Thank you. You're welcome, he said. So, you're a sorceress that knows the holy language. How peculiar. Mages don't usually bother to learn it. I can do 3 times the amount of work as a witch and sorceress than by relying on sorcery alone. Intrigued dragonfly wings flared behind his jaw, along his arms, and behind his back. You only need the abilities of a warlass to achieve the magic trifecta. I'm satisfied with my abilities as they are, and I don't know how to summon an archangel. I bet the power would increase again, though. If you discover the secret to summoning one of them, share it, will you? If they refuse my prayers, it would be a valuable alternative stratagem, he said. I certainly will, she parroted back. Have you ever had a prayer answered before? My requests have come to pass, he said. Whether the angels granted them, I do not know. Honestly, I've never knowingly met one. High Priest Conviction claims to have met Asiel, but I don't believe him. You? Hingsuk is the regional archangel of Hayeri, so I've prayed to him my whole life, but he's not listening. Not to me, anyway, she said. I've heard that Hingsuk isn't around anymore. At all, he said. He hasn't been rumored to have walked this planet since he broke the dark days at the end of his 8th age. I hoped it wasn't true. I've invested in him for so long, I doubt the other archangels would be receptive. Plume, they're not concerned with inconsequentialities like that. But perhaps Hingsuk keeps to himself. Perhaps he's less ostentatious than the others and exists among us quietly. The two entered the library and sat facing each other at a small table under a spiraling staircase. Mages, researchers, and philosophers made use of the library, and Ether's presence drew the attention of nearly everyone. The smell of shuffling parchment pages reminded her of home. Hayeri's library was the only place free from her kingdom's ominous fog. It had been her favorite place to spend time. It was where she had learned the architectural craft from her mentor and mother, Master Sash. It was where she could escape to any corner of their world or their sister planets. What's your favorite book? He asked. One by a dimension hopper. She detailed her fantastical adventures across the worlds. I reread it often. That there can still be grander fantasies beyond the magical world in which you live. That daily enchantments have become so commonplace that simpler tales pale in comparison with what you take for granted. Is that what draws you to it? Plume wasn't sure if Ether intended to insult her or not. She wasn't sure how she did feel, but his words rang true. Because this is the same reason I like the books I do, he said. I've never seen the story that you mentioned in this library. All our Dimension Hopper books detail the history of their planet. Someday I'll have to purchase the one you speak of. What's its title? Scout. I'll keep an eye out for it, he said. I appreciate the suggestion. Conviction has terrible taste in literature that doesn't involve the holy texts. What's your favorite book? The Life and Times of Basil, he said. Really? No, he joked. I've read it more often than any other book, but it's not my favorite. There's a book by a prior high priestess who speculated what a spawn's afterlife was like. What did they say about it? Well, once a spawn dies, no new souls can be added to their collective. That is to say, anyone born after their death has no chance of being judged by them. There may be other souls that are still alive that might be judged by that spawn. However, they don't drop dead as soon as the spawn judging them dies. They might even meet a different spawn in life that will take control of their fate instead. Plume nodded, knowing all of this, but not wanting to offend the Archspawn, who would decide whether her soul found peace or horror for eternity. But what happens in the time between the spawn's death and their final judgment? There's never been a recorded instance of a spawn enduring after their death as a ghost, so where are they for that period? What happens to the ghosts once they fade? Does the spawn review the lives of those who had died while waiting for the others to follow? Jalajal of Mihai of the 11th Age postulated that there's a waiting period until all the souls have died. that there's some dark nothingness that the spawn waits in until everyone in their collective has arrived into their soul bank, that there's some plane of existence where this physically occurs, and, theoretically, the dimension hoppers could find it to interact with the ghosts or the spawn. Jalaja also speculated that spawn observed the occurrences of the rest of the age unfold while they wait, but I think that was too speculative. Colorful feathers sprouted from Ether's wing nubs while he recounted the learnings. Even though he was focused on the topic, he approached the subject with more excitement than analytic consideration. Does this plane also contain the Blessed Lands, along with the accursed ruins? She asked, honestly curious. She said those probably existed on parallel planes. Perhaps there were dimensions where the angels and demons could travel to meet beyond this world. I suspect that if she's right, perhaps Hingsuk lives his days in such a place. It makes sense. Otherwise, why has no one seen him? Surely the mages would notice with their advanced sight. If there wasn't a secondary plane, it would also mean archangels and archdemons are constantly among us. I doubt that. They'd become bored and throw blessings and curses around for their own entertainment. If they didn't have somewhere better to reside, they would take control of Coserai for themselves. Or all of Hagam, for that matter. Take control? Plume found Ether's response troubling, but she kept her tongue behind her teeth. They had strayed from his trained pleasantries, the prescribed script Master Tim had mentioned, and she finally detected his real self emerging. She waited for him to continue. And when you summon an archangel or archdemon, you have to summon them from somewhere. It would be absurd to summon Lau from a market as he's purchasing a plum. It's much more likely he'd be stripped from his flaming throne atop a mountain of bone in a deep pit of physically manifested despair and agony. Ether thinks that because spawn deal judgment onto thousands or millions of souls, that they are inherently better than those they judge, that because they have that power, they have an inherent right to rule. It's as foolish as thinking that because mages had magic that they had a right to rule the kingdoms, or that because a man's father was a king, he was entitled to a throne. How does he rank wizards, sorcerers, warlocks, and royalty then? Perhaps because I'm both wizard and sorceress, he places more worth on me than the usual sorcerer. Maybe he views everyone besides other spawn below him. Then again, because he's the Archspawn, perhaps he perceives himself above them too. It would be intriguing to unravel his views. Without a doubt, his opinions are a product of his upbringing in the impenetrable castle's egotistical atmosphere. She asked, did Jalaja compose any works to expand on the topic? No, she was killed after the work was discovered in her desk. Was it blasphemy to postulate about such ideas back then? She asked. The priests in Hayeri spout little, but their notions fearing the accursed ruins. In the 11th age, indeed, he said. What do you think of it all? I can't imagine all the Archspawn of old living here, but I could envision a few of them living among us, interfering only when they were invested in the outcomes. Of the archangels, perhaps the less popular ones, Fontame, Hingsuk, Foya, that don't have any other prayers to answer, you've given me an idea. What's that? She hid her annoyance over him asking her opinion and then not letting her finish. I should try praying to the lesser archangels to get the blessing for the castle's foundation, he replied. I might have better luck. Admittedly, it wasn't a terrible concept. Plume didn't agree that the archangels she had listed were lesser, but she did not give voice to that opinion. She still needed his help after all. You'll have to let me know if you find success. You'll be the first to know. His wings grew. Unfortunately, wings were not reliable indicators of truthfulness and deception. A spawn might feel fearful, anxious, or calm in response to a question, but there was no correlation between the emotional response and the answer. Any number of memories or related thoughts could account for the changes in wing appearance. At least he pretended to care. Throughout their conversation, Plume learned how she would maintain the connection with him long after the castle's structure was cleared of its curse. She deduced he was attracted to her. However, she did not want to lead him on to increase her chances of receiving a blessing for the castle. In addition to having moral scruples against it, she couldn't imagine how dangerous it might be. He also felt entitled to power, but the High King undermined his potential political influence. If I can alleviate his frustrations, I'd likely keep him as an ally. The most obvious solution is to give Ether a sense of agency over his life via developing a desired ability. I'll turn the Archspawn into a wizard.